Yes. All right. Welcome back to the recording. I am Alex.
I'm Scott.
I'm Alexei.
I'm Farouk.
Okay. So today we're going to cover the questions for day 2 and day 3 of the Advent of Code. It's now Friday on day 3. And then we'll go over the answers for day 1 and discuss how we got to our answers. But without further ado, let's jump into the description for day 2.
Question number 2.
Let me share my screen so we can get to it. Let's see, day 2. Okay. So day 2. I'll read this first one.
Okay.
Now, you need to figure out how to pilot this thing. I'm assuming this is the submarine that we had been working on before. On day 1, it seems like the submarine can take a series of commands like forward 1, down 2, or up 3. Forward X increases the horizontal position by X units. Down X increases the depth by X units. Up X decreases the depth by X units. Note that since you're on a submarine, up and down affect your depth, and so they have the opposite result of what you might expect. The submarine seems to have already had a planned course for your puzzle input. Is this the same as the first day? Is this the first day? Did I not load up the right day?
It's day 2.
Oh, wow.
No, this is true.
That's day 2.
Huh. The submarine seems, oh, maybe because I already did this one.
Yeah.
It seems so familiar.
We already solved them, so it looks
Okay.
familiar.
The submarine seems to have already planned a course, which is your puzzle. You should probably figure out where it's going. For example, forward 5, down 5, forward 8, up 3, down 8, forward 2. Your horizontal position and depth both start at 0.
Okay.
The steps above would then modify them as follows. Forward 5 adds 5 to your horizontal position, a total of 5. Down 5 adds 5 to your depth, resulting in a value of 5. So depth being how far below 0 or below the surface of the water, right? Forward 8 adds 8 to your horizontal position. So you were 5 before, we add 8, now we have a total of 13. Up 3 decreases your depth by 3, resulting in a value of 2. So depth used to be 5, we're going up 3, and so now the depth is 2.
Okay.
Down 8 adds 8 to your depth. The depth used to be 2, and now we add 8, so now the resulting value is 10. And forward 2 adds 2 to your horizontal position. So the horizontal position used to be 13, and now it's 15. After following these instructions, you should have a horizontal position of 15 and a depth of 10. You multiply these together and you produce 150. So the actual question here, calculate the horizontal position and depth you would have after following the planned course in your own puzzle input. What do you get if you multiply your final horizontal position by your final depth?
All right, that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah.
So our final answer is just going to be one number, the product of your horizontal position and your final depth.
Yeah.
So first, we're going to need to get that horizontal position and the depth. The horizontal position sounds really easy to me because it only ever increases.
Right.
There is no back. Your submarine cannot go backwards in the ocean. You're only going forwards. So you just need to add some conditionals. Every time you see a forward, you're going to add that following number to your current horizontal position.
Right.
Vertical is a little more difficult because you can go up or down. And you got to remember, because you're in a submarine, you're thinking about depth. So going down makes your depth increase. If you're going down, you're going deeper. Your depth is becoming a bigger number. If you're going up, that means you're going up to the surface of the water. So your depth is getting smaller. So make sure to keep that one in mind when you're trying to solve for depth.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the hardest part of the question will be trying to parse through the data to actually get or format the data in a way that you can use.
Yeah, no different than day 1 though. I mean,
Yeah.
day 1, you also had to go through a list of strings. The only added part in this one, like you say, is to be able to separate the forward from the 5, the down from the 5, the forward from the 8 in your data, so that you not only have the conditional, the thing that you're going to be deciding, which of these two variables, depth or forward, you're going to change, and then how much to change it.
Yeah. And it seems quite easy that there's only even 3 conditions. We have forward, down, or up. Those are the only 3 that we're going to see.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the first part of day 2. Any other questions?
Very good.
All right. Good luck, everyone.
Let's try.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Let's try day 3.
Sure.
Can you guys see day 3 okay on mine?
Yeah, mine is zooming.
Yes. Make it a little bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Day 3, the binary diagnostic.
Okay.
So, Scott, you want to read this one?
Sure, but I'm going to read it off of your screen share. So can you scroll for me?
Sure.
All right. Day 3, binary diagnostic. The submarine has been making some odd creaking noises. So you ask it to produce a diagnostic report just in case.
Not what you want to hear in this.
What? No.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. Deep into the
Hope
ocean.
it's not too deep yet.
Yeah.
We don't have a water.
Up.
All right, let's keep reading. Maybe things are going to get better. The diagnostic report, your puzzle input, consists of a list of binary numbers, which, when decoded properly, can tell you many useful things about the conditions of the submarine. The first parameter to check is the power consumption. You need to use the binary numbers in the diagnostic report to generate 2 new binary numbers, called the gamma rate and the epsilon rate. The power consumption can then be found by multiplying the gamma rate by the epsilon rate. Each bit in the gamma rate can be determined by finding the most common bit in the corresponding position of all numbers in the diagnostic report. For example, given the following diagnostic report, 00100, 11110, 10110, and so on. I'm not going to read a bunch of binary. Can you scroll up a little bit for me? Considering only the first bit of each number. So let's scroll up, see that first number a little bit. So that first number, 00100. If we're only looking at the first bit of that, well, it tells us there are 5. If we only look at the first bit of each number, so of each row, we're going to look at the first bit. So that'd be 0111110011100.
I can highlight.
I just read
lines.
down from the left side there.
There's that one. There's that one. There's that one.
Yeah, so he's highlighting the zeros on the first bit on the left side right now. Well, it tells us there are 5 0 bits and 7 1 bits. Since the most common bit is 1, the first bit of the gamma rate is 1. The most common second bit of the numbers in the diagnostic report is 0. So the second bit of the gamma rate is 0. The most common value of the third, fourth, and fifth rates are 1, 1, and 0, respectively. And so the final 3 bits of the gamma rate are 1, 1, 0. So the gamma rate is the binary number 10110, or 22 in decimal. So if you don't know how to convert binary to decimal, you're going to have to search about that. You're going to have to figure out how to convert a binary number to a decimal number. Let's continue. The epsilon rate, so we already talked about the gamma rate, now it's the epsilon rate, is calculated in a similar way. But rather than use the most common bit, the least common bit from each position is used. So the epsilon rate is 01001, or the exact opposite of the gamma rate, or 9 in decimal. Multiplying the gamma rate, 22, by the epsilon rate, 9, produces the power consumption, 198. Use the binary numbers in your diagnostic report to calculate the gamma rate and epsilon rate. Then multiply them together. What is the power consumption of the submarine? Be sure to represent your answer in decimal, not binary. All right, so you're going to have to do a few different conversions to decimal. You're going to have to get the gamma rate, convert that to decimal, get the epsilon rate, convert that to decimal, and then multiply those numbers together for your final answer. This one's a little confusing to understand, I think.
Well, I mean, I think when they actually went through the description,
Yeah.
it made it a lot more clear. When they first, just kind of put it out there as a paragraph before the list of numbers, it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Not really very clear, but I think the example made it more clear.
Yeah, so you have to look at the bit in each position in each row and compare that to all of the other rows and find the most common and least common ones.
And pretty much when you actually find gamma, you find epsilon already.
Yeah,
So,
Something about that way as well.
sure. Sounds also okay to me.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Farouk, any questions?
Yeah. No, clear for me. So it seems like we need to linearly go through all the inputs as in length of the input. For example, there are 5 digits.
for the sample input, there's 5 digits, yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
really more for the puzzle.
Yeah, I'm sure the actual puzzle will have more.
So you have to go this number of times through each number and count the binaries to get the rates, gamma and epsilon rates.
Yeah, today it's vertical and things to horizontal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
all good.
All right then. So good luck, guys, and we'll see how you guys do with it. This next
Right.
section, we're going to actually go over the answers for day 1. So if you don't want to have spoilers, then this is where you would stop. But otherwise, let's dive right into day 1.
Let's go. Who wants to go first?
Lexi, you want to show us
Alright.
what you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. This will stop with the screen sharing. Share my just is big enough.
A little bigger would be nice.
JavaScript.
Yeah, actually, so I mentioned that. Oh, am I gonna do like JavaScript or Python? And then I realized after what is that? Yeah, I already made all the file in JavaScript, so I guess I'm gonna do JavaScript. So what did I do? Part 1 of day 1. So I imported my puzzle first as a text file, and so I'm just reading through the text file and converting it to string. And if you look at the puzzle, everything is like next to each other. So just when it breaks, I just put it at that point. And then I map through to actually return an array of number. So time 10. So if we console run actually this one. The puzzle.
Uh-oh.
What do I let me just puzzle text. Oh, okay. Wrong name. Okay, yeah, I just return a puzzle of number with the map. This one. All right.
All right, so that's his formatted array, just formatting the input data.
And then after that, we need, if I remember the question was to check if the next one is bigger than the previous one, right?
Yeah, we
Right,
had to check.
increasing or decreasing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it
How many
increased
times
from the
did it
one
increase?
before it or decreased.
So I just looked through my puzzle, the one I just received from here, and then we're using the method map, and then just checking if the value is smaller than the next one actually. If so, then I just counter plus, and then at the end just consolidate my counter. So I don't remember the result of it. I found 1,532 value, which was bigger than the previous one. So
Okay.
pretty simple, this one.
All right. Yeah, very short code.
Yeah.
Spent more code, more lines of code, just importing and formatting your input data than actually solving for the answer.
Solve.
Yeah. Actually, for your map, you don't even have to do a bracket and return, since you only have one line in there. That could have just been parseInt item 10.
I just-
You don't even need the 10. ParseInt
Yeah.
assumes 10. So even if you want to shrink it even more, it could have just been after the arrows, it could have just been parseInt item.
Is it true? I think parseInt doesn't always assume 10.
What would it not?
parseInt.
ParseInt, I think, does not always default to base 10.
It depends on your string. If you have like
Yeah.
a 0x in it or a b in it, it might change it, the
Yeah.
base of the string itself.
Just,
But none of the numbers that we have are anything but base 10.
yeah, so you can, for here, you can do it. But in other cases, you might need to be careful.
Depending on the quality input.
Yeah.
The other thing in line 12, your map, you're doing a reduce.
Yeah.
So that could actually have just been a reduce instead of a map. But, other ways.
Well,
other options.
it's actually not even doing anything. The only thing he's really doing inside of there is incrementing this counter.
That would be the reduce. That would be the accumulator in your reduce.
Okay.
You pass your reduce an accumulator, which starts at 0, and every time it changes, every time you go through the array, you're just bumping that accumulator when it needs to by 1.
So you don't even need to initialize the counter beforehand.
The accumulator will do that for you in the reduce.
Nice little
Well,
shortcut.
that's assuming you know that it even exists. So
Yeah, so
what it
I just
does.
take just the first and in the next one, then just
Yeah,
add together. So
just other possibilities that I see in the code.
I think I started with actually Redis, but at first I didn't return it as a number. So then I was trying to do something with parsing inside the Redis, and then for some reason it wasn't working. So I was like, yeah, screw, let's just go back to the map.
That's true. You could have done, you could have done the reduce with the parseInt inside it. Yeah, because the reduce would just pull in the array. It doesn't care what it's inside it. It's an array of strings. Inside your reduce function, you would change that back into, but you need to have the previous one, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so I don't think reduce would work here because we need to keep the counter and the value of the previous one.
Does the reduce not come with the counter?
A reduce passes on the solution to the first iteration on to the next iteration.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can have a counter in there. You can only pass on one thing to the next iteration. So we
But
can
you don't
either
need
pass.
to pass the counter. The counter should be passed by the function, just like the map. Otherwise, the map doesn't really need a counter.
But we do have the index.
In map,
In
yes.
reduce, do we have an index?
I don't know. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So
So
the
the index, then we
JavaScript-
can do it.
Does the reduce have a counter? Let's look it up. Can you Google JS reduce and see if it comes with a counter?
If I
There's a collector, but not a counter, I think.
Okay, so there's accumulator, but no counter.
Yeah, accumulator, it has a,
so no comment.
Okay, so I take that back then.
you can search it, Alexi.
Because
I didn't search it. I just,
Well, we can. We
yeah, you
get
can
have
search it.
previous value, current index. I think if we can have the index, then
What is previous value and current value?
those are the values that you're passing in. But since we still have our array separate, our array is outside of it. So we can still use the index of the value from our array.
Yeah, if you have an index in, that's not bad.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is,
No.
since you're
I don't
only
think so.
doing the last value, you can also just create, God forbid, a global variable.
Yeah.
And then each time you go through, you just populate that global variable because it's always going to be the last one anyway.
So you can create your own index.
Yeah. Anyway, other.
Yeah, one question regarding your solution. I don't know if you answered this, but why did you go with map in that puzzle.map, not for instead of for each?
So that's what we discussed. with
Big
Scott.
discussions from before.
It's like what for each map for loop. I don't know. Just
I think he's too used to using React and React Native.
could be.
Yeah, because map returns items and you have to store them somewhere else. Okay.
But as I didn't really need to return anything, just like I don't know.
Okay, okay.
Straight away, I started to write further that map, and then I was like, okay, I think it's gonna work. So.
It works.
All right.
So does the
Next part.
JavaScript for each, does that return what? Anything?
No, it doesn't return anything. It just loops through each item in the list.
Yeah.
So it
But
doesn't
map
actually change.
returns it.
For each can also change the array. For each can, yeah, it can
Can
change
you
the
take
values
the
in an
array it's
It can
iterating
mutate.
through?
Map cannot, because map returns a new array.
What happens if you
For each
change
doesn't
the,
return.
what happens if you change the length of the array in the for each loop?
Length.
And a new array, and
The length of the array that you're iterating through,
Yeah,
probably just cut off elements, I guess. I'm not sure.
interesting. Because that is a problem with iterating through for loops and changing the array as you iterate through for loops. I'm not sure if like the for each had accounted for that or not. Something to look into. Maybe we'll figure it out
It
and,
might cause some bugs, I'm not sure.
okay. But anyway,
Okay.
anybody else want
oh, I
to?
didn't do my second part, but it was the same, pretty much.
Well, let's cover the first part first.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, since I did JavaScript too, should I share my code
Yeah, why not?
now?
There's
Always
a
interesting to see
difference
styles.
between
It's
slightly different.
99% the same. All right, can you see my code now?
Yeah.
All right, so here, we're still doing Advent of Code 2021, day one, part one. The exact same things at the beginning as Alexi. For those who are more beginners in JavaScript, we're actually using Node.js in order to add a little bit of extra functionality so that we can run our code in the terminal here. And also so that we can import our data files. So I have two files. I have one for my real input and one for my sample input, because like I mentioned in the previous video, please run your tests, run your code with using the sample input first before you try it with the longer real question input. That'll let you know if you actually have good code to start with. All right, so first I have to import FS, that's for reading files. Now I can use that to read my file, and I'm reading my input.txt. I could also, this is the one that I want to change when I'm changing my import. If at the beginning, I'm always going to use my sample text, and then later, after I get the correct answer with sample, I will just change this one to input. And now I can import my full input text. And also a little bit of a shortcut compared to Alexi's code is Alexi used the .toString method after this, but with your file import, with the read file sync method, you can also specify the encoding as a second parameter here. So I said I wanted it to import as Latin 1 because I didn't want all of the characters from UTF-8. I wanted only pretty much English letters and numbers. Next one is I split it the same way Alexi did. I split it on the carriage returns and new lines. And I'm going to put a comma as a separator between all those. And then another little shortcut here was in order to get all of the elements there into numbers, I can do quite simply .map number.
19.
Yeah. So that's just a little shortcut if you want to convert every element in your array into a number. So with that done, now all of my array is nicely formatted for me to start working with. So now I have pretty much the exact same code as Alexi here. I have my counter initialized, except like Farouk, Alexi, and I just talked about, I used the for each method here instead because I didn't need to return anything. So since I didn't want to return anything, there was no need to use a map. Other than that, they do the exact same thing. Map and for each both just iterate through every element in your array and do whatever function you want them to do on that element. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to compare that element that in a for each or map, you just give a temporary variable name here. I just called it n for number. And I also have my second argument here as the index. That'll tell me where in my array am I, what index value am I looking at. So I want to compare the current number to the element in my array, my original input array, that's one index behind that number I'm looking at now. If my current number is larger than the previous number, I'm going to increment my counter. And at the end, I just console log my final counter. And it'll give me the full answer. Very short code, very simple.
Very cool.
Nice.
What happened if you would use UTF-8?
In this case, it'd be the same answer.
Okay,
No difference here.
and then for your split, I noticed that you have the comma in there. Does that add the comma? Doesn't it just search for the
Let's
comma?
see. Yeah, I think I don't need that. That was a relic of some of my old code that I had copied,
Okay.
where it actually was important. And this function actually, this entire bit right here, I'm going to use in almost all of my puzzles for Advent code,
Yeah.
but I will have to redo my split method for almost every puzzle because I'll be splitting on different things. I will usually use this one for everyone because almost every puzzle has the new,
Yeah,
a
like
new
a
line.
one set of instructions per line.
Yeah, it's one thing per line, but there are other things in the middle that I might want to also split out
Sure.
to separate it in a little, just to separate it a little bit more.
I also noticed you're using a /R and /N. So you have a carriage return and a new line, but you're using a Mac.
So I probably don't need,
You don't think you need the
I don't
RN,
know.
the R. I think the R is one of those like pain in the ass things
Okay.
that Windows had added.
Yeah,
Not that it really matters.
For
but-
that one, yeah, just on the /n.
I didn't spend any brain power on redoing this. I had
It works,
this code,
man.
I had
The
this code for my
important thing,
puzzles last year,
important
which I-
point, right?
which I did on Windows machine last
Yeah.
year. And on a Windows machine, that /R was important.
Yeah. And so like, the thing that we said before, don't pre-optimize, get it working. And in that sense, you
Yeah.
absolutely got it working. And then my brain's already going through optimization mode. So I apologize for that, but
No, it's good, it's good. I didn't actually know that wasn't a thing on Macs. That's only for Windows that you have that.
stupid Windows.
It made it a little bit more difficult to parse through some of the questions.
Well, having it there doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
If anything, you can say that's a cross-platform feature.
Are
You've
you
had to
telling them to buy a Mac? or-
No, I think
Better buy a Mac.
I honestly think if there's any beginners watching this,
Yeah.
this is useful. Because
Yeah.
one of the difficult things for me last year when I did this as more of a beginner was just trying to format my input without
that's true.
knowing this.
Well,
That's true.
And I had to figure it out. I had to figure out, okay, what am I actually getting? Like, what is my data before and what do I want it to look like afterwards? And I had to do some trial and error to figure out that I did need that R in there.
I spent the most time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so luckily this year I know what to expect, so I can just cut that out. It's a little bit easier.
The first thing I was doing is just console logging my puzzle or the input in OK, just to be sure that it's formatted exactly as I
Yeah.
wanted to play with it after.
Yeah,
So
that's a great tip is console log everything. Like every time you change something or every time you create a new variable, just console log it. Make sure you know what everything is at that point in time.
Cool.
All right, someone else want to share?
Farouk?
Yeah, okay, I will go.
Bruce, you used Python this year, right?
Yeah, I went with Python. And
Okay.
I'm really enjoying it.
Good.
let's see day 15.
Yeah. It's been a while since I used Python as well.
After the event of coding, I go back to JavaScript.
Well, Python's actually kind of nicely suited for this because of
Yeah.
because everything comes in as arrays to begin with. I'm interested to see how we handle those arrays.
Okay.
Is there any better
I'm
way to
sharing it.
import in JavaScript, or is this the way to do it?
Get it read in a file
Yeah,
for Node? No, probably. I mean, what you guys have done is
the only way, really.
not the only way, but probably the most realistic way of doing it. I mean, you could, if you're really good with buffers and streams, I mean, you could just cut
Yeah,
out a
you could
buffer
do
and stream
stream.
it if you're really efficient, but I mean,
Hmm.
how many people really want to deal with that?
Okay.
All right, are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't see it yet.
Can you? Yeah.
Yeah, I had to give permission
yeah.
to Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's shared now.
Oh, I'm glad.
Can you
that
guys see?
didn't Close it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, so you got both in one file.
Can you zoom a little bit on Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, should I hide this one maybe?
Yeah, let's hide part 2 for now.
Okay, so I actually started this year with Python, yeah, and I thought I had to go through some slides or presentations I had during university, but I start just writing Python and I enjoy it, like how easy it is to get back to Python, you know? It was so easy, just print and function declarations. Yeah, and it's going well so far. Let's see on day 10.
It's a nice, clean looking language.
Yeah, that's something nice about Python, right? Okay, so my logic is pretty much the same as you guys had in JavaScript. The only thing difference I noticed it here is in JavaScript, you guys imported the input and converted it to list, and at the same time, you map through each item and converted those strings to numbers, right? But in me, I'm importing the input and passing it to my function, and I'm converting these strings to input as I compare them, so not in advance.
Right.
So in JavaScript, there would be a parsing within,
A for each.
yeah.
A for each, a
Yeah.
for loop, basically, instead of using the for each.
Yeah. So first of all, I created a simple utility function called this get sample, which opens a given directory, reads in content of it and passes it as a list. So I'm planning to use it for other days too, as reading, we will have to read the file content, I think, for all puzzles.
That's
Yeah.
interesting to me that your split function, you don't have to specify where to split. It just knows to split on a new line.
It's assumed default.
That's a
I
lot
think,
more
yeah.
convenient than JavaScript, I think.
I think so.
JavaScript
And
has
list
its own,
method
like, trim. It's going to assume, I think, that it's going to be white space and so on. But
Okay.
you can override it. Or not.
And this, we don't have array. I think it's called list in Python, the arrays. So it's converting them to list here, and I'm calling that method, passing the file name to read from.
Yeah.
So it's reading the file, converting it to list, and passing it to my function as an array here. So I have a counter, and I am looping through each element with for loop. We have this for in range in Python, and you can customize how you want to loop through each item. For example, by default, the first index is supposed to be 0, and this is the length, the maximum index to loop through, and you can customize a step on as a third parameter. For example, on
Now it looks
3
just like-
elements.
Now it looks just like a JavaScript for loop.
Yeah, it's 3. So I didn't need to customize them because by default, I need to loop only one item at a time, start from 0. And I'm comparing each element with the next element and incrementing the counter if the current element is, next element is, if the next element is higher than the current element, I'm incrementing the counter and returning it.
I have a question, Farouk.
Yeah.
On your line 13, counter plus equals 1. Did you have any errors there when you were first writing the code? Was your initial thought to do counter plus plus?
Actually, as you already know, I have a Copilot
Oh, you co-piloted this. That's not cool.
Yeah, so I think this suggestion didn't work. But this one was me, yeah. It was from me. I didn't have any errors here. I had errors in this solution. Actually, my first submission was wrong because I didn't have this converting to int stuff.
Okay.
That's where I had the problem. So after that, I added this, and the difference was only 1.
Okay.
Yeah, probably when it goes from 900 to 1,000.
Alexi and I looked through your code a little bit earlier today, and we were surprised when we saw that counter plus equals 1, because we thought, oh, can you not do counter plus plus in Python? And apparently you can't.
No, you
Apparently it
can't.
doesn't exist in Python.
Right.
So I know if I was moving from JavaScript to Python, I would probably make that error many times. I would initially just think, okay, counter plus plus, and get an error
I've tried to
Even-
stop C++ now.
because of such.
Because
Yeah,
I
me too.
don't have it,
Okay.
or the
Me
newer
too.
languages
In
don't do that.
JavaScript,
Oh, interesting.
JavaScript, I used that plus plus a couple times, but it's weird because sometimes it's pre-run and sometimes It's after run, no? Like,
No,
It's always after.
after run. You can do
But
a plus plus counter.
Yeah, if you do, if you put it in front of the variable, it's pre, but if you put it after, it's post. But that's the confusion and reason why a lot of the newer languages just do away with that whole confusion. Even formatters, like my PHP formatter in VS Code will always stick the plus plus before the variable, knowing that that's usually what people mean.
Interesting.
Even though that's what might not be what you mean. For
Yeah.
example, if I put it in as a parameter for a variable because I want it passed before it's added, and I know that it's gonna happen, it's so like not what people normally expect, that it's probably better practice to either get rid of it or, you know, make sure that it's on a line by itself, so you know that it's always gonna happen in isolation, that it's gonna be what most people expect. But anyways, cool.
All right, thank you, Farouk.
and
Are we
we
gonna
have
see some Rust code now?
difficulty in this part too. Yeah, I had a little bit confusion in this part too.
Yeah, the
Since I
import.
seem to forgot it. I just tried to import it without system from utils get input, and it wasn't working. So I searched and finally found this one. Since they are sibling directories here, day1 and utils, I think I needed to add this one to be able to import from a different folder.
Interesting.
Could have been. Can I see the get sample?
Get sample, yeah.
Yeah, can we see that again?
And
So you're open
is the
sample, yeah, so you're opening the directory name. So what are you sending as a directory name?
Get input.
Oh, no, can you go back to the original file that you had
Yeah.
before? And then in the bottom with the get sample, what if you did a .. and then get rid of the path append?
Okay, get rid of this one, right?
Yeah, just test
And
it.
here,
No,
Here?
down at line 15 now.
okay. Here?
Line 15, nope. As the file name itself.
Like this?
Because of the sample, oh wait, the sample's input's in the same folder though.
Yeah, same folder, yeah.
But it's interesting that it had to go through. Well,
Uh,
try running and see what happens. Because what you're doing with that line 4 is you're adding the ... to it.
So just like this maybe, or 2 dots.
Try 2, because that's what you had added before on line 4. But what happens if you run it like this? Is it still going to
But
say can't
maybe-
find a file?
Maybe I need to add the one, since it's get input has to access it from here.
Oh yeah, okay. So you're
Yeah,
gonna
I
go
don't-
up 1 goes to utils, so you have to go up another.
From here, go back 1 and go inside day1 to get the sample input.
Okay, because this is in utils, go back 1, day1 sample input. Huh.
So
Do you not need to specify the path in line 5 from ... utils? Or do you not do it that way in Python?
that you mean like this?
Oh, so that's
'Cause
probably.
that's where you're importing
That's
get
probably
sample.
where, yeah, okay. Because the utils is getting it from the reason sys is there is maybe so that you can find utils, not necessarily so you can find the file.
Yeah, that's what it's telling is that you can't find utils.
Okay.
Yeah, but now, yeah, it's working. So that's it.
Interesting. Cool,
Okay.
spot on.
All right.
Right. Any questions?
Nope.
Should we see the Rusty code before we go on to part 2?
I want to see Rusty code.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay, I will.
so I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah,
seeing.
I will stop sharing.
And I will see if I can find my Rusty code. Okay. This is with using GitHub's editor.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh,
Looks no different, other than the fact that there is this
Oh.
tabs at the top.
Yeah, and not as many colors.
Yeah, not as many colors. So, of course, setting up and reading the file took the most time. Like,
Yeah.
it happened with Haskell too because of monads, but it happened with this because of, you know, IO. IO tends to be somewhat fraught in a lot of languages because there's so many ways that you can pick up stuff. For example, this one actually I think picks up as a buffered reader, and then you have to do all the conversions. But anyways, so you see there's a bunch of stuff I pull out of the standard library to do my reading from the FS package or module, the IO module, and the path. So it's quite a, yeah, it's not something as simple as reading a file you would think would be a little bit better, but anyway. So line 20 to 22 is where the reading from the file actually happens. This is something I pulled out directly from the Rust docs, I believe.
Okay.
Or was it Stack Overflow? I don't know, one of the two. I had to start looking into it because I was like, oh, where's that function that reads a file? There is none. Of course not, right?
Oh,
But it's typed. And so when you see that arrow in line 20, it's essentially, you know, declaring a return type. But there's also types within. Anytime you see the single point of colons, that's usually typing, whereas the double colons tends to be scoping. It's also something I've seen in other languages, but it's also in C++. But so the way that you can read this is line 20 is that there's a function called lines from file that has a parameter list. In the parameter list, there's a parameter called file name, which is an implementation of a abstract class called asRef, which is of type path.
Okay.
Or a type of path, or subclass of path, or whatever you want to call that, subclass of path. It's going to
read. Just made a function to read the file.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And wait, it gets better. And so it's going to return after I'm done. Of course, this is not something you're going to necessarily know beforehand unless you have a certain intention in mind. But so let's say for this one, for example, if you were going to write the signature first because you're going to do some function prototyping or any kind of prototyping or planning, and you did the prototype before you did the body. But typically I do it, well, anyways. So it's going to be, I'm going to be returning a result set, and a result set in Rust is a way to encapsulate a maybe, or a way to encapsulate something that may or may not work, right? Because I can have errors,
Yeah.
right? IO is fraught with problems, and there might be errors. And so they are wrapped in this thing called a result.
Okay.
And the result could have, or will probably have, a vector, and the vector itself will contain strings.
So is a vector similar to an array?
The vector is very similar to an array.
Okay. So
Semantically, there are possible differences in the way that people might approach an array. The typical array in the sense of Rust is that it is fixed. Once you set an array to size 3, it stays size 3.
Okay.
Whereas a vector is variable in terms of length. So it's unknown, right? And so a vector makes a little bit more sense with this because I don't know how long it's going to be, right? All right, so that's the function, that's the signature. That's what this function is intending to do. It's going to take a file name, it's going to return a vector of strings wrapped into a result. So the body of the function 21, it's okay. So we're going to take a buffer reader, and the buffer reader, it's going to create a new one. And as a parameter to create the buffered reader, we're going to pass it a file, and the file, we're going to use I believe it's a static public function called open that is in the file package or file module, and it's accepting something called the file name. And the file name we've already established is going to be an implementation from a reference to a path of the type path. And so, and then there's this question mark after it, which is saying it may or may not work. Which is valid. The file might not exist.
Okay.
Or it might be a corrupted file, or something might happen. Maybe it went over the internet connection dropped or whatever. That's the question mark, right? So it may or may not work. I'm acknowledging that I realize this might break. And so that's why it's wrapped in a result. Okay. Now, assuming that works, I'm gonna get the lines out of it, which is just gonna chop up that input and chop it up into the buffered reader and then once the buffer is full and it's got everything that it needs to, it's gonna chop it up into lines. And then we're gonna do what's called a collect, which means that when we're doing this reading and putting up in the lines, there's an iterator that goes through and actually points at different points at the end of each result. So as this thing gets built, there's a pointer that actually follows the end of it. So it kind of knows intelligently where to start adding new stuff. It needs to add new stuff. And that's the default way that the buffer reader will work with lines. But then the collect says, okay, I'm finished. We can get rid of the iterator or we can reset the iterator depending. I'm not really sure which of the two it does yet in this language. This is what I've gleaned so far, and some may be wrong, but we'll see. Since the pointer, or since we're finished reading, we don't need the pointer anymore. I just want to get the whole thing at once. Okay, now I'm done creating this large thing, and that's what the collect does. It's,
Okay.
I'm finished adding on to this, just give me the whole thing as a result.
Okay.
Whew. And then we read the file. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
But there is maybe an error.
yeah,
Maybe.
there might be an error.
What does it do if there is an error? It just doesn't.
You can catch the error. So the
So this is
result.
like a try-catch block? kind
No,
of?
well, the question mark just acknowledges that it might happen. We're gonna wrap it into a result.
Okay.
And whoever calls this function lines from file, because it's in a result,
Oh, so they'll.
it's got to do something with the result.
Okay.
And part of the things that needs to do with the result, one of the things is called okay, which means that, oh, everything happened all right. And one of these is called error. And even within there, I think there's two more, like sum and another one that I didn't get into because I was already like over my head. I just wanted to get to the problem and not spend all this time trying to figure out how to read a file. Yeah. I still haven't started the problem because I can't read the file. Like
So-
part of the way through this, I was like, I should just paste the problem set into the beginning of my file and just do away with this entire problem of reading.
That's what I did for day one last year.
Okay,
I think
so
for day one and day
Alex?
two, I just pasted the whole input into the
Yeah,
top
why
of my
not,
file.
right? At that point, I'm just like,
Like const input equals array, and then I pasted it inside.
perfectly valid. It's a
I think on
program,
day three, I switched for Stack Overflow for a more efficient way to do it on JavaScript.
right?
So is there any similarity to optional chaining in JavaScript with that question mark?
Optional chaining, yes and no, because optional chaining will always return like the null, right? So if you get something that doesn't have a value,
You
it's just
can
gonna say,
actually provide another.
Undefined, I think.
oh, that's true, that's true. What's that?
So what happens if you do not use question mark there?
I don't know. That's, well, I can't run it
Because if
right
you, if the function which calls this lines from file function has to handle the result, right?
here. Mhm.
So if there is an error, that function has to handle that error.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have the Rust compiler on this one because I actually had done this on another computer. But what we could do, no, we can't do.
Sandbox, no?
I was gonna say I could run it within the sandbox online,
Yeah.
but you can't read files with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
So I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
That's a good question. So what happens if we don't? In other words, and this is something I had wondered before, and I tried just by getting rid of the result because I just want to return a vector. I didn't care about the result. I wanted to unwrap it. And you can unwrap it, but I tried to get rid of this and done an unwrap there, which basically takes the result and just says, you know, assume everything's okay. If things go wrong, then the whole program just blows up with what's called a panic. But I didn't try it without the question mark. So that's something that's a good question. I'll try it next time.
Okay.
Anyways, getting into the final problem itself. And so very similar to what you guys had done. Typically what I'll do with the samples is I typically think the samples are small enough that I'll just paste the questions into it, kind of like what you had done with the entire puzzle. But I'll just paste the samples in so I don't have to deal with IO.
Yeah.
And that's what I had done before. So I had done and I'd proven that my thing had worked with the internal vector. And then I tried doing IO and I spent like an hour or two trying to figure out how to read a stupid file. But so that's what that part on top was that's commented out this here is Normally this would be regular, but then I commented out. Actually, when I first created the array, and then I realized maybe I should do it with the vector because the vector has a little bit more I can do with. But anyways, and plus the vector was something that was going to return from.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, maybe make everything vector. But when I first did this, I made an array, completely big aside. But anyways, and so I'm gonna come back to this then afterwards. Or I'm gonna come back to that one. I'm getting back to both of them because this happened because it ended up being a vector. So let's skip over the minutia and get into just the regular logic for this, because I think that's going to be probably the most familiar when you compare it to, for example, JavaScript code and the Python code. I have a counter, like you guys had, mine called increasing. The only change that I had to make is calling it mute to say that it will mutate. So it's first like a const instead of a let. Otherwise, it assumes that everything is immutable. But I'm saying this is a mutable variable. Other than that, we have a range operator, which is available also in Python. I think it's not in, is it in JavaScript as well? Forget. No, because the dot would be a destructuring, right?
To
Spread operator.
But so for num in the range of 1 to input stuff.length, which is however many there are.
Okay.
So from 1 to whatever, inclusive. So I don't have to start with 0, in other words. So, and other than that, it's the same as you see before. If num is greater than the next, then I set increasing plus equals 1 or increasing equals increasing plus 1. Actually, I'm not sure if I can do plus equals 1 with Rust. I should try it. And then the else is only there because when I first did this to kind of like make sure I was doing it okay, I actually printed out exactly what they had printed out, which is the number and increase the number. This does it with C formatting, so you actually have a little placeholder where your variables go, and then you have a list of variables that you have in there. You can actually give these names if you want, and then you can use a vector or whatever to provide which variable goes into which placeholder. But if you use an anonymous placeholder, a blank placeholder, then it just goes in the order that you provided. Anyways, that was it. And then at the end, I just print out the number, and there's the placeholder, and there's the variable. I print out the variable.
All right.
So now let's go back and talk about vectors. So coming back to vectors, so I read it from a file. So at this point, I have that result that we were talking about before. It's wrapped in the result. I do an unwrap, which, like I said before, assumes that everything's going to go okay. If an error comes back, then it panics and the whole program crashes. But unwrap assumes everything goes okay, and then it sticks it into input strings. So now I have a vector of strings.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to take that vector of strings. I'm going to get the iterator for the input of strings. So now I have an iterator, then I can just do iterator-ish behaviors like next. So instead of doing like an index, I just push an iterator, a little arrow or pointer that goes through, because I don't need a specific position. I just need to do something for all of them. So I get an iterator, and the iterator allows me to use a map, same as you guys did, right? Instead of int val or int as a casting operator in Python, I use parse and make sure that the parse knows that what it's supposed to parse to. It's supposed to parse to a 32-bit integer. Now the parse itself also comes with, because it's a conversion, returns a result. Because it might work, it might not work. It might be something it can convert to a number. It might be like a completely wacky string that it can't convert to a number. I'm going to say, assume everything's going to go okay. Otherwise, crash. So I unwrap that as well. That gets mapped back to the X. And so now I have an array of numbers. Now I start out the iterator, and now I'm done with the iterator. It's gone through, and the map has gone through the whole thing. And so now I'm finished. I need to collect it as a unit and assign it to whatever on the left-hand side of the assignment operator is. So now we're going to the left-hand side. It's going to assign it to something called input stuff, which has been typed to a vector of numbers, a vector of 32-bit integers.
It's interesting that we iterate and map.
Yeah.
Can we see again just the first function, like You said there's no return or anything. Right?
Oh,
There is
here's
no-
the thing. If you don't have a semicolon, as the
Okay.
last statement in your function, it assumes that the result of that expression is your return.
If there is a semicolon, no.
If there is still a semicolon,
Okay.
That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
something new.
Yeah, interesting that it's let variable. The way you declare variables is through let, similar to JavaScript.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in down below when he has let mutable equals. I'm a little bit confused why. Oh, it makes me appreciate JavaScript where if I want it to be mutable, I can make it a let, or else I can make it a const if I want it immutable.
Right. It assumes, most languages assume you want a variable. It's called variable. It must change over time. But this one assumes the opposite. This one assumes everything is constant.
So you declare everything with let.
All the variables with let,
Okay.
whether or not they're const or not or mutable or immutable, you have to use mute if you want mutable. It's going to assume that it's going to be immutable otherwise.
Okay.
But the let is just a declaration, kind of like a var in JavaScript or in PHP, even though you don't really need to, or in JavaScript, I'm sorry, even though you don't really need to.
There is also all this code in the same way as JavaScript, I guess.
For the most part, it seems like it's so far,
Wow.
from what I've seen so far at least.
I think this video is getting quite long and we haven't even
Yeah.
touched part 2 yet.
Let's get to part 2. Let's hurry up.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation.
All right, so part 2. So let's read part 2.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even do that yet.
What's that?
I was about to say, should we just keep going with you for the part 2? As we already on that.
Oh, sure. But let's read the question first. So considering every single measurement isn't as useful as expected. So now, part 1 again, it's the sonar thing, right? Where you're just going to go out and like, yeah, for some reason, I think like this submarine's on top of a volcano and everything is just like, or on top of like a mountain, underwater mountain, everything is getting deeper. It seems by the numbers, it seems like everything was just getting deeper around it.
It's going down.
It's going down because I don't know what direction the sonar is going. We don't have a vector component to this.
Well, is our submarine even moving yet? I don't
That's
think we've
true,
even
that's
moved
true. We
yet.
haven't
We're just
moved yet.
using our
We're just
sonar. We're
sonar.
just pretty much sitting there in the water for all we know,
Yeah.
using our sonar to survey the land.
So when these
on
numbers
the
come
bottom-
back, I
at the
don't know
bottom of
what
the
direction
ocean.
they're coming back from. But anyways, that's a complete aside. So considering every single, there's just too much noise in the data. Instead, consider sums of 3 measurement sliding windows. So basically, we're taking, combining 3 to see whether or not we have increase or decrease. So kind of mellowing out the data a little bit, smoothing out the differences a bit. So consider sums of a 3 measurement sliding window, again, considering the above example. And you see for A, they combine 199, 200, and 208. For B, they combine 200, 208, and 210. For C, they combine 210, 210, or 208, 210, 200. And for D, they combine 210, 200, 207. So in combining these numbers, they created a grouping, right? And hoping that in terms of the measurement numbers will smooth out some of the ups and downs. Start comparing the first and second 3 measurement windows. The measurements in the first window are marked A. And in the A, so these 3 in A. So those are all part of the A group, 189, 200, and 208. We add those 3 together, and their sum is 607. Right? Okay, the second window is marked B, and B is, these 3. 200, 208, and 210, and we sum them together to get 618. So we went from 607 to 618. The sum of the measurements in the second window is larger than the sum of the first, so this is considered an increase, right? The goal is now to count the number of times the sum of measurements in the sliding window increases from the previous sum. So compare the window of A, which is that first group of 3, with B, which is that second group of 3. Then compare B, the second group of 3, with C, the third group of 3, and then C with D, and so on. Stop when there aren't enough measurements left to create a new 3 measurement sum. In the above example, the sum of each 3 measurement windows is as follows. So it gives you an example that you can use to validate as you know, one of the tips that Scott had given before, as you create your programs, if you can see that it matches up with what is displayed here, then chances are you have a pretty solid take on what a good algorithm will look like. So in this example, there are 5 sums that are larger than the previous sum. They're bolded, kind of, you can almost see it. And considering the sums of a 3 measurement sliding window, how many sums are larger than the previous sum? So this one, instead of taking individual measurements and saying whether an individual measurement is larger than the previous individual measurement, now we're taking groups of measurement of 3 and seeing if they're larger than the previous group of 3. And each time each group of 3 is actually just one more, you know, one window slid down from the next.
So it doesn't sound that hard to me. You're pretty much going to do the same code as we already showed for our part 1s. You're pretty much going to have to loop through the data. You're going to have to take the current element that you're looking at, the one previous to that, and the one previous to that. You'll have to sum those 3 values together and compare that to the 3 right before that.
Yeah.
Or so the current element -1, the current element -2, and the current element -3. So those 3 you'll compare.
If you start with the
current
third
element.
See, that's the interesting. You have to create complete groups of 3. You can't have an incomplete group of 3. So if you're doing minuses like what you're suggesting, you have to start with the third one. If you're going to start with the first one to create your group, you have to make sure that the last ones stops to have, well, as soon as you've gotten the last group of 3, the last 2 can't have groups of 3s then.
That's true.
So that's one of the things you have to watch out for in your code. Anyhow, any other questions before we get into the answers?
Let's do it. Can I share mine first then?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Can you see my code now?
Yep.
That's still my part 1. Let's go on to part 2. So part 2 is nice now because now I don't have to explain any of this.
Right.
We all know now about importing files and parsing through them. That's great. So we can get into my part 2 code and see what's actually different than part 1. Not much.
Right.
The only different part here, I'm still implementing a counter. I'm still using a for each loop. This time though, I'm just having a different conditional. This time my condition, I'm counting my current element, the element 1 before that in my array, and the element 2 before that in the array. And I'm summing those 3 values. And I'm checking if that's greater than my current element -1, current element -2, and current element -3, the sum of those values. So I actually made some assumptions in this. I am lucky that the input values were kind and there were no negative numbers. There were no strange outlier numbers, because if for some reason there were negative numbers or anything, my code would break. It would not work. This code really assumes that any group of 3 will be bigger than any group of 2 or any group of 1. So if I wanted to make this a little bit better, then I would not be able to use a for each loop, I think. I think it would have been better to start with a for loop. Then I could actually make it a little more customizable for where I want it to start and what exactly I want it to do.
So what happens with the input I -0 when I = 0? Then you're going to input, you're accessing input -1, right?
Not gonna pass then. It's not gonna enter in the state.
Because in for each, I should start from 0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, how are you accessing it?
I guess it's just not throwing an error.
Yeah.
So
Because you got the answer somehow. So
Yeah.
I mean,
let's see. I mean, I can show you here, right here. I'm gonna do no.
Yeah, can you maybe console log input I -2?
That's my answer I'm getting.
yeah, but you got no
Do you
error.
want me
So
to- yeah.
Yeah, maybe console log input I -2.
It's just gonna get defined and then just.
Yeah, interesting.
but you're gonna have to put that before your if. Now you've created that as your if condition or your if
Yeah.
statements. Scroll all the way up to the first one.
Oh,
Oh,
can't get it.
no.
Oh, can't get it.
So then if
Let's do
I
it-
is 0,
Let's just change it to my sample input.
why don't you just add it if I equals 0?
I'll just change it to the sample here. That's shorter so we can see easier what's going on.
Undefined.
Undefined.
Undefined,
That's
and
right.
I guess it doesn't throw an error when I try to add undefined to a number.
It's just not entering.
Can you type in node in the thing in the bottom? To get the interactive.
Just type in node.
Yeah. And then let's do
Mhm.
let
Undefined
A
plus 5.
and then semicolon. And then let's do 2 plus A. Enter. That should have been not a number. Interesting. Because essentially that's what you're adding.
Yeah.
So is not is
And-
NaN greater than NaN? Or can you do NaN greater than NaN? Now we're entering the weird bowels of JavaScript where you have like,
Freedom.
these weird
NaN
values
is
like
not
false,
greater than
right?
NaN. Let's see.
Interesting. I don't know. what happened.
Because if you do the same thing in for loop, it will crash. If you try to access out of range index inside a for loop in JavaScript, yeah, it usually gives an error.
Was it for
I
each
think-
not implemented try?
Yeah, maybe
try
for each
window?
has some special things.
I have
in
no
it.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I know that this is not great code for this problem. If I wanted to make it better, I would do a for loop and I would start at index 3.
Okay.
You could,
Interesting to know that for each has handlers there.
Yeah, it must.
interesting. But you got the answer.
It works.
That's the important
We
thing,
don't know
right?
why it works, but it works. That will happen sometimes. All right.
Interesting. Cool.
Alexi, do you want to share? I think your code is similar.
Now, let's just make sure that the point of this whole thing is to learn. So, the fact that, we make mistakes, that's just part of the process. So I don't want to have people expect these to be the answers.
Yeah.
These are approaches.
Way different ways. There's many different ways to do it.
So this is exactly the same part as the part 1.
Mhm.
And then also mapping through the puzzle.
Mhm.
And then what did I change actually is just these 2 parts. So the value and plus equal, just the next one, the next one and the next 2. So that makes the group of 3. And then for the next one to compare with, just +1, +2, +3. So then it's actually 4 away.
Mhm.
And then after that, just compare if it's smaller than the other one. If so, then I increment the counter by 1.
So then there's the same question. What happens if it's the second to last or the last? Where is the I plus 1?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same answer.
Just the opposite, but yeah, we both have
Minus, I did plus.
and apparently map has some magic that solves that problem too. So for each and map are both magical.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting that even though our code is so similar, we did it a little bit different ways.
Right.
I did a look back and you did a look ahead.
Yeah. I tend to minus, which you always smaller down, and then you tend to do the greater than
Mm.
also.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now me. I'm sharing my screen.
All right, let's see some Python.
Yeah. So it's the same file as before. And here's part 2. I don't have any
You don't have to
maps.
re-import everything.
Yeah, I have a counter, and I'm also looping through my input. And the thing is, it's starting with 0 this time, and it's going until the last element from the end, not until the end of the list, but third last item from the end.
Right, because it's
I'm calculating. Yeah,
Oh,
it's from 0 until. So calculating the first window from the current item, current +1 and current +2, and the second item is one more lower.
So it's really
items.
similar on mine actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically,
so-
I mean, we don't really see a difference in performance here, but whether should we have casted everything instead of recasting as we go? Because remember, you're casting the same number multiple times as you go through this for loop.
Yeah,
I don't know.
so maybe one for loop before this one would be a better,
It's something that you'll have to probably
have a
discuss
one.
to see whether or not, it's a disadvantage or not. But that's one thing I see is that, oh, there's a lot of casting going on, but maybe it makes no difference. Maybe it's faster this way. Who knows? I mean, it's something that you have to try to really kind of see.
You mean the casting would be when you actually import?
Sometime before the for loop.
Yeah, like
So
I
yeah.
did for the on
Right,
or Scott.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, other than that, yeah, yours is the same. Yours is a look ahead, right? Look ahead 3 or look ahead. Compared to the ones in front.
he just solves that problem that we discussed in Java, that we had in JavaScript, where he doesn't worry about searching for an element that's not in the array. Because that's why he has his -3 in his range. So he's stopping when he gets.
But that +3 concerns me at the end of the second
He
window.
still would go one past, right?
I don't know. Maybe it should.
No, it's quite fast.
No, because you go
No.
-3.
It's inclusive. The range should be inclusive of that. The range is inclusive, right? Or is it not inclusive?
In Python,
Yes.
I think it is inclusive. It is including the third last item from the end. Because it starts from 0.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So then you're okay. But then like because the third last item from the end, the second window starts from the one after that one. Right, so let's say we have an array of 10 and we've gotten up to number 7, right? Does that make sense so far? And then the
Yeah.
second window is 8, 9, and 10, right? And so 8, 9, and 10.
I think it's going until 8, I think.
Okay, because if it goes until 8, then that last +3 is weird, no? But let's find out.
So yeah, I'm giving the sample input.
Yeah.
So inside sample input, we have this one. So it is supposed to go to here, right? Let's see. Input 8 or this one. It's going until 7.
Okay, so then you are safe.
Yeah.
So 10 minus 3, right? So it goes to
Oh.
so it goes to 269, right?
Yeah.
Ah,
Okay, so then go back to your code.
Yeah.
Now the second window, the
Yeah.
variable second window in 28, start with input x+1, which is 8. And then x+2, which is 9. And then x+3, which is 10. Now you've run out of variables at that point, no?
Starting from here. Inclusive. So, oh, I see what you mean. So it might be exclusive then, because
Well, let's do this. Go back
if this
to-
is the
Yeah, go back to your code and in line 24 at the end of your linked input -3.
Yeah.
Do a +3. That then just cancels it out, right? So then just put linked input and see if you can do anything out because it just basically it'll cancel out that +3 and the -3.
-3 and +3.
That's fine. Yeah.
So it's. Can you see the terminal?
Oh yeah. So it's
It
index
takes
out of
out of, index out of range.
Okay, so then that second window, right? Because your length -3.
Yeah.
The length is 10, -3 is 7. And then your input +1 is 8, and then 9, and then index of 10. So that input +3 at the end should have exited your input range.
Can you try it if you get rid of the -3 on line 26? Can you try running it and see if it'll succeed?
Okay.
Now you get the answer.
Was five's the correct answer for the
Yes,
first?
For the sample, can
Right.
you get rid of the -3 on line 23?
Get rid of?
Yeah, in your loop condition here. On line 23? Yeah, can you remove that -3 for a minute and see if it still gets the right answer?
We have to
No?
do at least a -1.
Okay, try and. Oh, so I guess it is. Okay.
Yeah, because we are going until here now to 60, right? But we are trying to call this 2. That's why out of range. So probably 2 will also give.
What happens if you, what's in the range? The range is inclusive or not? Can you print out the range?
Range is from 0.
Or print out X, I guess, is the easiest way to do it.
Print.
Did you get the click to draw value?
This is it's printing the response.
Yeah. So 0.
Yeah, so it's exclusive.
So then you have index 7, 8, 9 left. Yeah, so it works. That's good.
So it's exclusive. Okay, it's not inclusive then.
Yeah, so it's exclusive. My bad. That one.
Cool.
Right. So that's it.
All right. Very simple question.
But then it doesn't test the last 3.
It does because it's +1, +2, +3. So it was it ended on the index number 6.
I see, because the last 3,
percent would be index 7, 8,
because
and
you're
9.
testing, but you're testing forwards, right?
Yeah. And if you look at the advent of
The last
code
3
here.
doesn't have another group in front of it to test. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
I actually started from this image. It's 1 part 2, right? So here, yeah, basically I'm starting from this one, and first group this one, and second group is starting from here. Current item +1.
We see no image.
Oh, you see no image.
We still see your code.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, can you see it now?
Yep.
So this is here. This 3B starts from item +1, item +2, and item +3, right?
Right.
So that's pretty much the logic I had here. Yeah, this is the first window item, and item +1, item +2, and this one is item +1, item +2, and item +3.
Right. So you're stopping 4 from the end.
Three from the end.
4 from the end, because when you're testing 240, you stop. You don't test 269 and down. You test 240, 269, 260 as one group, and then 269, 260, and 263 is the second group. And then you finish. You never go, and X is never 269.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your last X was 240.
Right.
But you don't need to check 269 because you're checking X +1, X +2, X +3. So it works.
Yeah, so it works.
Yeah.
Good job.
Cool.
Okay, stopping to share my
Okay.
screen.
I guess I'll go back
Stop
to
sharing my screen.
mine. Which one? Ooh, no, they're both. And then thing. Everything's the same at the top. So we can skip all that nonsense. Now I have two mutations because I wanted to actually print out. Did I want to print out the group? I don't know. For some reason, I have two mutations. I have an increasing, which tracks how many are increasing. Oh, I also track the last group, the total from the last group. And so as I go through, I stop from 2 from the end, which basically means when I have the last group. So I do the addition, same as you, the look ahead, number plus 1, number plus 2, and total that up into a new group. And then I just make sure the new group is greater than the last group. It is, increasing plus 1. But then if not, then I store the last group number, right? As basically I store it as something that I already tested for the next group. And so I go through again. And so I'm the last group. So even though I add forwards, I compare against the last group. Okay. Now, of course, the first group then is a problem because the first group doesn't have a previous group, right? And so I skip it. I just skip it. So that's part of that. If group is not equals 1, then I do the increasing. Otherwise, I just skip the increasing to the last group.
Actually save you some time.
You have less number of calculations.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have to add as much. I just keep the result from the last mission.
Exactly.
Actually, it's quite a few number of calculations. Yeah, it decreases a lot.
I think on a really big puzzle, it can make a real difference.
That's half the number of additions.
Yeah.
Half the number of accesses and additions. So anyway, so that was my approach.
But you have to update that variable every time. So
It is one extra
still
variable.
is something happening.
Sure. Yeah, there is storage.
Yeah.
Instead of like every time going like for 3 different data.
'Cause you're
like
adding-
extract for array, save it anyway, you save it.
Because you're adding the same numbers anyways every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I have a question about efficiency. So in Farouk and Alexi's code, they created variables for the first group and the second group that they were comparing in their for loops. They created variables.
Sure.
Whereas in my code, I just used that code directly in my if statement. Would there be any difference in performance or efficiency?
I would
Creating a
say
variable first,
about
or-
95% certainty, there's no difference.
Okay.
Because there's an optimizer stage before it actually creates the machine code that needs to run, and those kind of things are optimized out. Because
Okay.
variable names are really for our sake.
Yeah.
A computer is just a location in memory, and if it through the optimizations it realizes, oh, it's the same location in memory, you're only using it once, puts it in there anyways.
Okay. Interesting.
I tend to actually put always in variable because it's easier for them to read the if statement.
Yeah.
And sometimes the if statements start to get long, so after that it's quite tricky. It's like when especially there is and or.
And there's a tricky balance between the two. Because at the same time, you don't want to give everything a variable name, because then you just have too many variables to remember. There's a cognitive, right? You know, what do you call it? A decreasing advantage.
When you start to add number to your variable name,
You got too far.
you went already too far usually.
All right.
But yeah, to answer your question, most likely not.
Okay. That's good to
Those
know.
are going to be.
Yes. I don't really have any knowledge about how the optimizers work.
That's a pretty cheap optimization to make, is to try to, if variables are only used once,
Okay.
and behind the scenes to just do straight up replacement, inlining. It's also cool.
Interesting. All right. Well, we all successfully finished day 1.
Congratulations.
Cool. Like I said, it's a strange submarine.
The noise.
I don't know how you like interpret any of this data. Like if it found like a bump, it's like, oh, it found a bump. I know it's 5 meters away. I have no idea in what direction it is.
We're just surveying the land for now. We're gonna figure out what to do next.
The only thing we've conclusively, resolved is that yes, we are sitting on top of a mountain underwater, and everything is getting deeper
It's
around
getting
us.
We might be right by shore. We don't even know.
Could be the sonar is not calibrated, and it's just like, oh, it's further away, but it's just flat. But because of the way that distance works,
Well, we got 25 days to find these keys, so I guess we're not in a big hurry.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we'll see you guys again on Monday when we will go over days 4, 5, and 6 and go over answers for day 2.
All right.
All right. See you guys later.
Happy
See
coding.
See you guys later.
Yeah.